First of all, good afternoon, teacher, and hello, my beloved classmate. As you guys know, today is the very last day of presenting the following chapter, and I'm going to be responsible for Chapter 9, which is stated about evaluating inferences, assumption, and other relevant arguments. This particular subject is taught by our lecturer, Bushan Suksiri, and will be presenting by me, phyrayuth. This particular chapter will be included 6 important parts, which are implicit assumption, assuming if reasons are true, the conclusion is, other relevant consideration, overall argument evaluation, and presenting a well-argued case, summary, and the very last but not least, the reflection over Romeo and Juliet. So without further delay, let us jump right into the very first part of this chapter, which is the implicit assumption. First of all, I want to define this word for you guys. Implicit assumption are those assumptions that we haven't been currently defined. We make implicit assumptions based on our personal experiences, position, and often without even realizing that is what we're doing. People tend to assume of something based on their personal experiences, acknowledgement to what they have seen. This is what we call implicit assumption. To be really exact, implicit assumption means people assuming without thinking deeply of what their judgment. They judge something based on what they have seen before or based on like natural things that has happened. To be more clarified, I have provided you with my 2 own example, and I hope this would help you understand implicit assumption. First of all, the first one is, I know that a boy and girl are dating because I saw them holding hands. People may assume that only people who are dating holding hands, because what they have seen or their personal experiences think that different genders, when they are holding hand, it means that the very 2 people is dating each other, but they haven't thought about other ways. Maybe that boy or girl is a very best friend for each other, or maybe they are siblings, they hold in hand like to somewhere that they really want, or maybe they are very very close but they did not date each other. So people assume based on their experiences, based on their acknowledgement or what they have seen before. So the second example is, he didn't say anything, I asked, so it must be he doesn't know. The only people may assume that the only reason for not talking about something is lack of acknowledgement or lack of knowledge. But maybe there's a story behind what they have assumed. Maybe he want to keep a secret. Maybe those questions is not about what to answer. Maybe it is his personal stuff that he didn't want to answer to the questioner. But people start to assuming that when you ask something to somebody and they did not answer the way you want the way you want them to, you start to assume that, oh, maybe that person is lack of knowledge, maybe their level is not this high. But it also maybe he or she doesn't want to spread their knowledge. Maybe he or she want to keep something in secret. So let's continue to the second part of this chapter, which is assuming if reasons are true, the conclusion is. So this chapter is really want to talk about an argument. When people start to read through an argument, when they saw a reasonable reason, they may think that, oh, the conclusion may be good. They may think that, oh, this argument is strong enough, but what they have seen and what they have thinks is not right. Before leaving assumption and how they affect inferences, we should know that one strategy for attributing assumptions to argument is less helpful than you might think. So people may think that when they add a very reasonable argument, they may change the way that conclusion will be presented, but what they think is really really different. So adding an assumption does not greatly advance the process of evaluating and inferences. This part means that no matter how you really add any like reasonable idea or your assumption, your like really really reasonable assumption to your argument, that process is not really going to help what your inference wheel, because like even reasonable is good enough when conclusion is not quite relevant. Your argument is still not strong enough to be presented. Another point is, notice also that adding such a hypothetical assumption does nothing to make the original argument any stronger, so it does not have to be done under our general strategy. This is also stated that no matter how you added your personal experience or personal knowledge or personal assumption toward those arguments, that argument will not become stronger or will not be more relevant. That argument is still remain the same, because like your assumption does not have like a specific information or specific background. You added it because of you have experienced those kind of thing, but maybe another people experience in a different way. So adding what you have thought or adding your implicit assumption may not affect or may not help your argument to be stronger. So without further ado, let us continue to the very third part of this chapter, which is going to talk about other relevant consideration. So the third part of this chapter is going to talk about working out what someone is assuming is often quite creative, because you have to be imaginative about what they might have assumed, or you have do some research into their views, or asking them or read them, or even reading their own writing. However, thinkings of other considerations which relevant to an argument is certainly where critical thinking become critical creative thinking. And to remind you, I will give a definition to the word critical creative thinking. Critical creative thinking is a way of looking at a problem or situation from a fresh perspective, to conceive of something to conceive something new or original. And it is also defined as the logical, consequential, disciplined process of rationalizing, analyzing, evaluating, and interpreting information to make informed judgment to his or her decision. So to be more clarified, this part want us to know about the other relevant consideration is to be a critical creative thinking is to have a overview toward some people imagination, or we may have a strategy to read their mind, to consider whether our consideration or that person consideration is relevant enough. We might have working out a lot to be useful with this kind of consideration, because it is such a tough work. And so the fourth part of my presentation is overall argument evaluation and presenting a well-argued case. So when presented with an argument, we often rush to judgment, evaluating it before we fully appreciated it. One important lesson to take from preceding section is that it is best to ensure that you're understanding the argument before commenting on it. This can be done through a careful identification and reconstruction. So this particular part want us to really deeply thinking of something before giving comments to that particular argument. As I have presented before, that people may assume assuming without deeply or coherently define or understand what the statement is. So this particular section told us that before judging or commenting on something, please make sure that your assumption or your consideration or your judgment is relevant enough to be participate in that argument. Going through some research, I have found that the consider technique for determine the quality of an argument, and to make it a strong argument, we'll have three things going for it. First of all, the form one. Its reason and conclusion will be related in such a way that if the reason are true, the conclusion will likely to be true. But make sure that the reason is not the assumption or what you may have assumed. And the second one is content. The reason will make claim that the reason may claim that are true and or have a high probability of being true, or maybe the reason is have published by a like professional or a strong background person. And make sure, like I really remind you, but make sure that your reason is not your personal or implicit assumption. And the very last part is context. Make sure that the argument as a whole fits the circumstances in which it was intended to apply. So let us continue to the fifth part of this chapter, which is summary. I am going to give you a small summarize of my own, and I hope you really going to understand my summary. I do it based on my knowledge and based on my research. So if you are going to evaluate reasoning skillfully, first of all, you need to judge whether the conferences are the good ones. And to do this, besides using the appropriate information, you need to look carefully for implicit assumptions, which it is reasonable to attribute to the argument, and you need to ask whether there are other relevant considerations which is need to be taken into the account. And also, where assumptions are concerned, you should attribute those which seems likely in the context make sense of what it is said, or what the reasoning as strong as possible, since we are interested in getting at the truth of things rather than in scoring point of people. It does not strengthen an argument to add the assumption like I have presented. No matter what assumptions you added to the argument, it will not make it any stronger. And that if the reason are true, the conclusion must be true. But make sure that the reason is published by a professional or a strong background people. Thought it may help you analyzing what is being argued and make your argument become stronger. So let us continue to the very last part of my presentation, which is the reflection over a story. And I'm going to give a small reflection to one of the most famous stories, which was wrote by the one and only William Shakespeare. And I'm going to talk about a part which is related to implicit assumption. There is an act, as I remember, Act 5 in Scene 3, where when Juliet drinks a sleeping potion at night before her marriage, and in the morning she does not wake up, and she's pronounced dead. They take her to a Capulet tomb where she will wait for the Romeo. Fair Lawrence write a letter to Romeo informing him of their plan. However, the letter does not get delivered to Romeo, and he has been told that Juliet is dead. When the time that Romeo want to visit Juliet's death body he really want to make sure that what he has heard is really true. He's happened to meet Paris, and at the time, Paris recognized Romeo as the man who murdered Thibault, and thus the man who indirectly murdered Juliet, because as you guys know or experience or have read the movie, Romeo and Juliet have a really strong love story. And because of this, since it is her grief for her cousin, and that is supposed to have killed her, as Romeo has been exiled from the city on the penalty of death, Paris thinks that Romeo must hate the Capulet so much that he must be returned to the tomb and to do something dishonor to the corpse of either Thibault and as well as Juliet. At this particular point, Paris has his own assumption as an implicit assumption. He did not have a coherently or deeply thinking of why Romeo came to visit Juliet's body. He didn't even ask a question. He didn't give a single chance for Romeo to really talk of what his intention is to visit this place. He all making an assumption by his own, and thinks that Romeo came here to do something dishonor to the dead body. And this particular part is really represented my chapter, which is also talking about implicit assumption. And thank you so much for your participation and attention, and I'm happy to answer your question, even though I will try my best to answer all of your questions. Thank you so much. Stay healthy and stay safe, everyone.